أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين. والحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون. الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن. الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود. فطر الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالصخور ميدان أرضه. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من يوم عداوتهم إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الحكيم وهو أصدق القائلين: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقل ربي أدخلني مدخل صدق وأخرجني مخرج صدق واجعل لي من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. I begin in the name of Allah, the most kind, the most merciful. It's due to that kindness and mercy that we have these opportunities where we gather in remembrance and glorification of Him Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. We then begin this sermon the way the commander of the faithful used to begin many of his, by advising us, Usikum ibadallah bitaqwallah, that I advise you, O servants of God, to be God conscious, God fearing and pious human beings. We finished the chapter of rights that we have been discussing for the past few weeks today, and that is Haqqul Khalit, the right of our associate. And what we looked at last week was the impact that friends or associates can have in our lives, both in a positive sense and in a negative. If we surround ourselves with good people, and the positive effects include emotional support, physical health benefits, improved mental health, and not to mention other aspects from the perspective of judgment as well, that if we surround ourselves with good people, we will be judged as being a good person. But the opposite is true, that if we surround ourselves with people who have bad akhlaq, bad reputation, bad habits, then what begins to happen is that those things begin to rub off on me. And science tells us that events such as risky behaviors, emotional distress, a lessening of academic performance, and all of these things will transpire in our lives, not to mention that on the Day of Judgment it will cause us to have regret because of the choice of friends and associates that we decided to have. Today we look at the culmination of this discussion by looking at some of the criterias that we should be looking for in the people we associate with, and the characteristics we need as well to attract such people. When we look at as I mentioned, when we look at the discussion on friends and associates, it's I would say mind-boggling, but it's really impressive, the amount of literature that we have on this subject. To say that it's not a small part of our lives, or it's not a small part of our religion about the people that we associate with and hang out with. Rather, there's a lot that has been written on this. And so one of my favorite traditions that describes who we should be looking for in the people that we hang out with comes from our sixth Imam as-Sadiq alayhi afdalu salatu wassalam. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, where he is reported to have said, as-sadaqatu mahduda. He says that friendship has limitations to it, or has certain conditions associated with it. فَمَنْ لَمْ تَكُنْ فِيهِ تِلْكَ الْحُدُودِ فَلَا تَنْسُبْهُ إِلَى الْكَمَالِ الصَّدَاقَةِ. He says, one who does not fulfill all the criterias of this friendship, then don't give your full friendship to that person. You know, full friendship, sadaqa, comes from the word sidq, right? It means absolute truthfulness and honesty. To that extent where the person that who is my sadiq will never fear any type of harm from me, ever, right? They can put their hands in my pocket and I wouldn't even think twice of what they are taking because I have complete trust in that type of persons. Very rare. It's very few people who have that level of trust and companionship. And so, before we extend that level of companionship and trust and friendship to somebody, the Imam says, make sure they fulfill all the criterias. But then he says, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ فِيهِ شَيْءٌ مِّن تِلْكَ الْحُدُودِ فَلَا تَنْسُبْهُ إِلَى شَيْءٍ مِّنَ الصَّدَاقَةِ. But one who does not fulfill any of these criterias, then don't give them any friendship. That means we still treat them with respect because that's the expectation, but we don't extend that level of closeness because there is nothing good within that person. So what are these conditions, right? The Imam alayhi salam says the first condition, أَوَّلُهَا أَن يَكُونَ سَرِيرَتُهُ وَعَلَانِيَتُهُ لَكَ وَاحِدًا. That his inner truth and his outer reality are the same for you. Yeah? That means he's not a duplicitous person, he's not a hypocritical person, his true feelings are manifested externally and they are consistent in how they behave with you. You know, there are sometimes people who will treat you a certain way a certain time, and then other times because other people are around they might treat you slightly differently. These are the type of friends who are not consistent. But the Imam alayhi salam discusses that we should be consistent, and the people that we should want in our lives are those who are consistent. Secondly, he says, وَثَانِيَا أَن يَرَى زَيْنَكَ زَيْنَهُ وَشَيْنَكَ شَيْنَهُ. That they regard your honor to be their honor, and your disgrace to be their disgrace. You know, in life, we don't allow people to trample on our good name. Yeah, that our reputation matters. Well, just the way my reputation matters to me, your reputation matters to me, right? And so if somebody begins to badmouth you, I will defend you because you are my friend, yeah? Because you are my associate. If somebody begins to speak ill of you, I will defend you because I don't allow for people to trample on your good name because your name is like my name. And then the Imam says, وَالثَّالِثَةِ أَنْ لَا يُغَيِّرُهُ مَالٌ وَلَا وِلَايَةٌ. He says that wealth and property and things of external nature do not change that person, right? And we know the effects of these things. If we gain wealth, our criteria and our importance and outlook begins to change as well. But here, the person with you remains consistent, that you don't see a difference because they have now a better job, for example, or now that they earn more money, for example. وَالرَّابِعَ أَنْ لَا يَمْنَعَكَ شَيْئًا مِمَّا تَصِلُ إِلَيْهِ مَقْدُرَتُهُ. He says, and they do not deny anything from you that they have the ability to provide for you. That means that if you need something, they are there for you, and they will look after you. And the final condition, he says, that they should never leave you alone in times of hardship. Man, if you look at all of these criterias, right, we might not have any friends, you know. These are very rare, and this is the reality. Like, this is how I think we have to understand the importance of sadaqah. You know, today we throw out the term friend very loosely, that they are my friend. Some people will consider the 500 people who follow them on Instagram to be their friends, right? Those aren't friends, right? Those are people who are just there in your life, right? But true friends, as we grow older, and I've given this example from my own life, you know, when we were in junior high and high school, the number of people that I would think are my friends are many. And then as we got into university, I see many of those have trickled away, and that number begins to get less. And then when I graduate, that number becomes even less. Eventually, the people I can say are my true friends, yeah, those jigri people, are very few. Yeah, they are very few in number, and in fact, it's most likely just your own family. Yeah, Your own family, who are those who are with you through thick or thin. And this is why the relationships between family members is so important, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who are consistent in your lives, right? But then we might have a certain circle as well, who are there. And so how do we attract such people? The fact is that we attract such people by us developing those same characteristics, right? If I'm a person who is consistent with people, I'm not a hypocrite. If I'm a person who defends the honors of other people, if I'm a person who will share what I have with the people who are close to me, if I am a person who doesn't change because I gain certain wealth, then naturally I will attract such people in my lives as well. Because others are looking for the same thing. We're not the only ones looking. Everyone's looking for those people they can trust. And so if people have characteristics, these characteristics will be known to other people. But besides this, not only are we to attract good friends by developing good characteristics, but after attaining good friends, we have a responsibility not to do things to lose those friends. Because it's one thing to gain something, it's just like a marriage. You can find a wife, but to keep a wife, you got to work at it. Yeah, you have to work at it. And in a friendship as well, to get a friend, maybe it's not that hard. We played basketball together, we hung out, we now text message, we're friends. But now eventually, if I don't develop my own personal characteristics, they'll get tired of me. Yeah, they might say, you know what, I don't need this toxic person in my life, for example. And so we have to learn certain characteristics. And this is where I just want to list off some points that I hope that you will reflect about, and I will reflect about them. Number one, we have to know our boundaries ourselves, right? Flexibility in friendship and association is important, but never flexibility when it comes to our values, right? Our values have to be consistent. And so if I know what my boundaries are, and if people are outside these boundaries, then I know that that's not a person I'm attracted to or I want to be attracted to. But if they also know my boundaries, they know what to expect from me. So number one, have defined boundaries. And always, our boundaries are defined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're not defined by my personal likes and dislikes. Those are the coloring within those boundaries. Yeah, those are the zina within that boundary. But the boundary is defined by Allah. So know your boundaries. Number two, be genuine, right? Be authentic as a person. Sometimes if I want to attract a certain type of person, I'll pretend to like what they like when I really don't like what they like. No, be authentic. If you like to read, be proud of you liking to read. Right? Just because they don't like to read, but you shouldn't change who you are for that person. Embrace your positive characteristics and don't pretend to be someone that you are not. The third, be a good listener, right? We often listen to try to see how I can benefit from this. And if it's not interesting to me, then I lose interest. This is how you listen to my khutbas sometimes too, Be a good listener. A good listener means that you have genuine interest in what that person is saying. If they are your friend, be always thoughtful, right? Have those feelings connected and be a good listener. Number four, be positive, right? A positive outlook on life is contagious. If people always help you look at the glass being half full rather than always finding a fault in something, that rubs off very positively in other people. And so be positive, right? Think of the good in everything. Number five, be open-minded. Now, what do we mean by open-minded? We talked about, having boundaries, but open-mindedness means that I am willing to accept people in my lives of diverse backgrounds. Sometimes we become very closed off as a cultural group and people to say that I'm only going to hang out with Indo-Pakistanis, for example, or not just that, Kashmiris, for example, or Karachi people, or no, we have to be able to realize that believers come from all walks of life, right? And I have to be able to embrace that, and part of that is being connected to the wider community. Number six, be reliable and trustworthy. Right? You have to be trustworthy. You have to be reliable. If you say you're going to do something, do something. And number seven, we have to constantly practice self-improvement. If I am constantly bettering myself, then the people around me will be people who will help me better myself as well, because they will be bettering as well. These 7 points, I'm going to read them very quickly again. Know your boundaries, be genuine, be a good listener, be positive, be open-minded, be reliable, and practice self-improvement. If we can work on these things diligently, then naturally I will attract good associates in my life. But I think more importantly, if I work on these things diligently, I will develop characteristics that the Imam of our time will find useful. Right? And that one day the goal is that he will look at me and say, that's the companion I need in my life. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والحمد لله قاسم الجبارين مبير الظالمين مدرك الهاربين نكال الظالمين صريخ المستصرخين موضع حاجات الطالبين معتمد المؤمنين اللهم صل على خاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين محمد الله صل على محمد وصل على سيد الوصيين أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب عليه السلام اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وصل على الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وصل على سبتي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وصل على علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة القائم المهدي صل على محمد وآل محمد صلاة لا غاية لعددها ولا نهاية لمددها ولا نفاد لأمدها اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات وتابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك على كل شيء قدير اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Yesterday we gathered to commemorate the shahadat of our second Imam, Imam Al-Hasan Al-Mujtaba alayhi afdalu salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. We send our condolences to the Imam of our time and to all of you on that shahadat anniversary, and we pray to Allah Azza wa Jal that we each get an opportunity to go for the ziyarat of our Imam to Baqi, and that we receive their shafa'at in the hereafter, inshaAllah. In the honor of the Imam, just a tabarruk, a hadith that I found to be very useful and practical. The Imam alayhi salam talks about the importance or the benefits one gains from attending the masajid. Yeah? And this is something that, the masjid is a very central place in our hearts. And so there are a lot of benefits the Imam says. He says, it's reported to have said, Man adama al-ikhtilaf ila al-masjid asaba ihda thaman. One who frequents and goes to the masjid will gain one of 8 things. Yeah? That means at least one of 8 things, but maybe more, right? Before we go into that, we've talked about this when it came to the Risalatul Huquq, the benefit of a masjid. We have to there are two things that are common in our faith. The one is that there are certain places that are masajid, and then there are certain places that are imam bargas or husainiyas, right? The husainiya, of course, has benefit because it is the place where the dhikr of Allah takes place. It is the place where the dhikr of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt take place, and anything associated with God has barakah to it. But the masjid is entirely different when it comes to rank. And we are fortunate. I mean, this hall inside the first two lines and the third line where the Imam stands is a masjid. While 24-hour prayer hall is, or the sajadiyah room is a masjid. And the masjid stands on its own as far as merit is concerned. Right? And there are many hadiths, but this one is very beautiful where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam Salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, where he's reported to have said, Ya Aba Dhar, inna Allah ta'ala yu'tika ma dumta jalisan fil masjid fi kulli nafsin tanaffasta darajatan fil jannah. He says that, O Abu Dhar, that a person who sits in the masjid, for every breath they take, they are earning a higher station in Jannah with every breath. وَتُصَلِّي عَلَيْكَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ, and while you are sitting, angels are constantly sending blessings upon you. وَتُكْتَبُ لَكَ بِكُلِّ نَفْسٍ تَنَفَّسْتَ فِيهِ عَشْرُ حَسَنَاتٍ. And the hadith continues that every breath you take, there are thawab that is given. But this is where, like I've tried to encourage us. I know the walls are very comfortable. Yeah, and I know that people come and they gravitate towards the wall. But man, there's nothing like sitting in a masjid. Right? And we are limited with the space that we have in the masjid. But this should be taken advantage of by everybody. Right? Come, sit, spend as much time here. Of course, the masajid have etiquette where you don't talk about worldly things, you don't put your phone aside, you don't need to, go on Instagram or whatever. But spend it, even if you just spend it in silence, there is benefit associated with that. Now, when the Imam talks about this masjid and the benefits that come from this masjid, I have understood this from not just the masjid itself, but even the Husainiyah, where we are frequent in our attendance to the places where the name of God is remembered. Right? And the Imam mentions 8 benefits, and I'll just read them, but I want to focus on 2. The first, he says, you will get ayatum muhkama, a decisive Quranic verse. Something will stick to you. If you are diligent, again, this is not just one time. A mistake we make is, man, I attended, I didn't get anything. Well, maybe that was your test from God to see if you should come back. Right? Come back. No matter what is happening, come back, because there is benefit in these gatherings. You will find a decisive Quranic verse, a useful friend, valuable all-encompassing knowledge, an expected mercy, information that guides towards the truth, information that saves from destruction, or the leaving of sins out of shyness, or the leaving of sins out of fear. Yeah? Some of these things are understood. A deeper guidance from the Quran we will get if we focus here, a valuable knowledge, even if it's in small increments, added mercy. But there are 2 of these points that I think are very important, to me. Number 1, where he says, وَأَخًا مُسْتَفَادًا, you will find a good friend. A good friend. Now this good friend could be many things. It could be knowledge, but let's look at it from the perspective of what we talked about in the first khutbah. That where am I going to find the best associates who will benefit me in this world and the hereafter? It should be at the mosque. Because we share the same values with each other. Right? And it's important that we make this commitment to come. We've always shared this, and this is something I'm very passionate about. That when you come to mosque, no one should ever sit alone. Ever. And again, this is something I hope that you apply wherever you go. You see someone sitting alone, you call them to you. Right? Or you go there. But engage in conversations, get to know people. But the fact is, the more we attend, the more we get known, the more we get recognized, the more relationships we will develop. And I'm telling you, we're fortunate here. And I know that it's because I'm biased with this mosque, But there are other mosques that are way too big where people get lost in those mosques. You go, no one even knows if you're old, you're new, you're visiting, no one knows. But here, you're known when you come, alhamdulillah. Yeah, and then you get to know each other, and that's the blessing of being like a medium-sized mosque, where you can see and understand and have people who will be there. And so the place here is one of the best places to attract people. Even though you may come once, sometimes people tell me they came, they had a bad experience, you know. And I'll tell them maybe I was having a bad day that day, you know. Come back again, I'll be better next time. Right? We'll all be better, because this place is a place of God. It's not mine, it's not yours, it doesn't belong to any one of us. It belongs to God. And so we all have to try and be the best that we can. Sometimes we fail, we keep trying to be a better version. And so you want good friends, and this is especially true for our youngsters. I know parents are always looking for their children to have good friends. There are a ton of functions that happen here with the youth and youth activities that they can benefit from and develop that circle of friends that could be very useful for them. So that's number one. The second point that I think is really nice, what the Imam says, is that if you attend the mosque frequently, what will happen is you will leave sins out of haya or khawf. Yeah? That means you will leave sinning out of shame, or you will leave sinning out of fear. Right? It's powerful. Look, man, what better place than to come to mosque? Honestly, that if I come to mosque for even 2 hours a day, for example, or a week, those 2 hours, at least I'm not sinning those 2 hours. Yeah. While if I'm outside, I could have my headphones on and listening to stuff. I could be talking about people. I could be looking at inappropriate things. But while I'm at mosque, I'm not sinning. And therefore, there's no place like coming here. Yeah, no place like coming here. And if I frequent it, that means if I am frequenting my visits, I am sinning less, more and more often. And eventually that haya or that khawf will take over, and I will leave sinning altogether. Right? But the place to come to is the mosque. And this is where, you know, we have many responsibilities when people come to our mosque. And that is that we can never judge someone who comes here. Yeah? Because the time that they walked in that door, him and I are equals. He's not sinning, I'm not sinning right now. Who knows who's better in the eyes of God? How can I judge someone at that time? Right? We don't judge anybody who comes here, and we don't remind people of what they used to be. You know, because they're now here, maybe they've turned a corner. I recite this hadith. This hadith, at least once a year minimum, I recite this, right? And this hadith is this hadith changed my life more than any other hadith that I've ever read, ever, right? Because it gave you an outlook of how to treat people. And so I like to share this as often as I can. This is found in Al-Kafi. It said a man by the name of Yazid bin Khalifa, who was rajulun min Bani al-Harith bin Ka'b. He was from a people from the tribe of Bani Harith. Yeah? So it was someplace in the outskirts of Medina. He comes to our sixth Imam, As-Sadiq alayhi afdalu salatu wassalam. Salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. And he says, Inni rajulun min Bani al-Harith bin Ka'b. I am a person from the tribe of Harith bin Ka'b. وَقَدْ هَدَانِيَ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلْ إِلَى مَحَبَّتِكُمْ وَمَوَدَّتِكُمُ الْأَهْلُ الْبَيْتِ. He says, and Allah has guided me to your love and affection, the Ahlul Bayt. Yeah? So the Imam alayhi salam welcomes him. And he says, he asks him a question. He says, كَيْفَ إِهْتَدَيْتَ إِلَى مَوَدَّتِنَا فَوَاللَّهِ إِنَّ مَحَبَّتَنَا فِي بَنِي الْحَارِثِ بِنْ قَابْ لَقَلِيلٌ. Yeah? He says, how did God guide you to our love? Because I swear to you, the Imam says, the people of Bani Harith don't have love for us. Yeah? Very few people in that entire tribe have love for us. So how did you find love? And he says to him that I own a farm. Yeah? And in that farm I have workers who work with me in that farm. And on Fridays it's their day off. And they gather together, like any extra food left over during the week, they keep it. And then on Friday they have a da'wah, they have a gathering. He's like, and they invite me to this gathering. Right? And then he says that before we start eating, one of the servants takes out wine. Yeah? And he pours it in glasses for everybody. And he says no one is allowed to eat this food until they drink this wine and send salawat on the Prophet and his family. Yeah. So he says, فَإِذَا تَنَاوَلَ إِنسَانَ مِنْهُمْ. No, he says then, sorry. لا تشرب حتى تصلي على محمد. You're not allowed to drink this wine and eat the food until you recite salawat on the Prophet and his family. And so he says, we recite salawat. And then we drink alcohol. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. He says we recite it. And then we drink alcohol, we get drunk, we have a good time. Yeah? And he says, فَاهْتَدَيْتُ إِلَى مَوَدَّتِكُمْ بِهَذَا الْغُلَامِ. And so because of that and the constant remembrance of you before we drink, we fell in love with you. Yeah? Now maybe that love was for the alcohol, maybe that love was for something else. But what is amazing is the Imam does not judge them. He does not judge them. He says, فَقَالَ لِي إِسْتَوْصِي بِهِ خَيْرًا وَأَقْرِئْهُ مِنِّي السَّلَامِ. Yeah? He says, tell your ghulam that I send my salam to him. Subhanallah. Who would not want to receive salam from their Imam? Yeah? This person was a person who drank alcohol. But the Imam says, tell him I wish him nothing but khair, and that I send salam to him, and that Jaffer bin Muhammad has said, Undur sharabak. He says, don't drink anymore. That's it. He didn't say, get out of here. He didn't say, what kind of person are you that you drink and now you claim to love us? No. The Imam saw there were imperfections, but there was something good. They were there with the Imam. And so they said, I accept this, leave this, and we will take you the rest of the way. This is how it is when people come to our masajid. Yeah? Doesn't matter what they've done. Doesn't matter the lifestyle they've led. Doesn't matter what they do in their private times. When they're here, they are my brothers and sisters in faith. Yeah? And I treat them with that respect. And that's the responsibility each and every one of us have. Don't judge a book by its cover. Yeah? You know, person may be going through difficulty. I read this, it was very beautiful. It says, in the darkest of nights is when you see stars. Yeah? And this is what we may see in people if we stop judging them, inshallah. We will find these things if we come. Come to the mosque frequently. You will find the benefits that the Imam talks about, and inshallah that wilaya and that mahabba and that mawadda will be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa akhiru da'wan an alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal asri innal insana lafi khusr. إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر صدق الله العلي العظيم.